Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Refuge from Narcissism, and this refugee video is sponsored by contribution from Erin. And she sent in a Jordan Peterson interview, which is 30 minutes long, for me to analyze. And overall, I like Jordan Peterson. I think he pulls some punches or some stuff he does that kind of makes me scratch my head. But, at the end of the day, he's good. He's good for the movement. So let's see what he has to say. It looks like this is narcissism related, which he does bring up quite often.
I was thinking as a psychologist that we may have been trapped in some kind of ant mill. Sometimes they get lost and then they start to follow each other, and then the first one is going to go in circles, and then they're going in circles forever, actually. Until they exhaust themselves and die. I sometimes feel that as a society, it can being caught up in these bad decision-making cycles.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to think about how something like that might be accelerated biologically by interconnectivity and the net. We do an extremely bad job of regulating narcissism online. There's no punishment for it. Then you just divide the comment sections, like real human beings here, demonic trolls and bots here in hell, right? Underneath, if your platform gets completely overrun by demonic trolls, which is probably almost the case now with Twitter, it's just going to collapse because then it's a non-playable game, right? There's not enough reciprocity for anyone to want to be on the platform.
I'll say this: if every channel is going to get trolls, every one of them, and if you're overrun with them, it usually means one of two things: either you're really good and you're over the target, or you're saying really, really, really stupid shit. And the really stupid shit doesn't get the trolls. Like the stupid shit will get the conservative trolls. Okay, when you're saying truth and speaking truth to power and saying things that you're over the target is when you get the massive influx of trolls. So it's two different types of trolls.
Professor Schippers, may I ask you some questions?
Yes, of course. What do you want to know, Rico? Oh, it's good to see you again, Jordan.
Good to see you again.
And we've worked together, of course, for a while. And
yeah. For what, about 5 years?
Yeah, for about 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that you were speaking out on what's going on in the world, and I was thinking as a psychologist that we may have been trapped in some kind of ant mill. And,
yeah, you mentioned that earlier. The ant mill. You need to elaborate on that. That's a very funny idea in a horrible way.
Yeah, I think we need to. So I've studied decision making for quite a while, and I see that people get sometimes stuck in decision making, and they keep on making the same decision over and over again. So with the ants, it's army ants actually, and they sometimes get caught up also because they follow each other. Then they sneak up upon a prey. They eat this prey together, or bring it back to the nest or something. But sometimes they get lost, and then they start to follow each other, and then the first one is going to go in circles, and then they're going in circles forever, actually.
It's like queen bee, worker bee, flying monkeys. The point is, all the ants, or whatever it is, whether it's bees, ants, monkeys, they're all following the leader. It's always follow the leader.
Until they exhaust themselves and die. So a whole bunch of, there's big, huge ones have been observed, and they push out sometimes the dead ends, and they keep on walking until they're all exhausted. So that's the bad news, and I sometimes feel that as a society, as a person, an individual, as a team, or as a company, but even as a society, we can being caught up in these bad decision-making cycles.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to think about how something like that might be accelerated biologically by interconnectivity and the net, right? Because that's partly why things are speeding up so much, is because whatever the underlying dynamics of human society are, they're happening way faster than they ever have happened.
Yes.
And a huge part of that's connectivity. And we actually don't know what the optimal level of connectivity is. People are starting to model that with neural nets. You can have a system that's underconnected and it isn't very effective, but you can have a system that's overconnected and then it's not very effective. And it has something to do with this principle of subsidiarity, which is the right antidote to that, which is that in a complex hierarchical network, things have to be networked at each level, not too much or too little, or there's catastrophe on both sides. And we really don't know. Like, we know that psychogenic epidemics can spread with unparalleled speed now, right? And one after the other in some sense. I mean, this whole gender dysphoria issue is a great example of that. And so we don't know to what degree this increased connectivity is. I think that's funny, is putting us in the ant mill
In the end,
situation.
it's called a death spiral.
Death
actually.
spiral, yeah.
And it's being used in management as well. But the first thing that happens is that there's a suppression of information. There is a micromanagement. So all these things that we tend to see now, dysfunctional behavior of people being learned helplessness is one of the endpoints. People don't know what to do anymore because their information is suppressed, their own opinions are not allowed anymore. There's one narrative that needs to be followed.
Or else.
Or else, yeah.
Yeah, that's fun to see that emerge.
Yeah.
You know, and it is, and
Yeah. I mean, that's a typical trait of the narcissist. Agree with me or I'll destroy you. Agree with me or shut up. Give me what I want or shut up. This is what I've been talking about. Where societal narcissism comes from. You know, it's based in cultural Marxism, communism, and those ideologies stress on one opinion being the opinion and to destroy everybody who thinks outside the box.
And the or else is lie or else. And yeah, that's very bad.
Or at least be with us, because it's, you know...
Yeah, but it doesn't take long before to get from be with us to lie for us. So that's a very well...
Yeah, it's interesting because one of...
See, a lie isn't a lie to the narcissist, to the cultural Marxist, to the communist, as long as it serves the purpose. See, a lie isn't a lie to a narcissist as long as it's serving them. It's for the greater good.
One of the things that Rosa Moskanter, I think her name, Rosabeth Moskanter, she studied it, and she said, you know, people have to be in collective denial also about this.
Yeah.
So the ants are running around and they're saying, well, we are going forward. Yeah, they are going forward, but in a circle. And so that's in a company, they keep on taking one bad decision after another.
Yeah, well...
The ants, see, this is kind of bad example they don't get. The ants are serving the queen bee, the queen ant, the main ant. The worker bees are serving the queen bee. The flying monkeys are servants. They're servants.
That denial, you know, there's a Freudian element to that, and I don't think that denial is exactly the right diagnosis. It's more like willful blindness. And willful blindness is easier because to deny, you have to know what's going on, then you have to generate a counter theory, then you have to use the counter theory to suppress what you know. With willful blindness, you can just not know, right? You get an emotion.
It's burying your head. So this is a long way to go around of saying it's basically burying your head in the sand or shoving your head up your own ass. That's all it means. The truth is all around you. You know what the truth is, but you bury your head in the sand so you don't have to hear about it. Plausible deniability.
Intimation that something's not right.
Yes.
And that's a call to explore. But then you can just fail to heed the call and you keep yourself in a state of ignorance. And
bury your head in the sand.
And the idea that that's a deadly threat to social order, that willful blindness, that goes back all the way to the ancient Egyptians.
Whoa.
So Osiris was the ancient Egyptian god of the state. And he was portrayed as a positive hero who established the healthy state. Now he had an evil brother, Set, and Set turns into Satan through the Coptic Christians. And Set was always conspiring to take out the rightful king. And Osiris's sins were twofold. He was outdated, so he's old, but he was also willfully blind. He could have seen what his brother was up to, but he chose not to. And then Set chops him into pieces, so everything falls apart.
Okay.
And then he dominates the state. And then the antidote to that, as far as the Egyptians were concerned, was Horus. And Horus is the Egyptian eye and the falcon. And so the antidote to willful blindness is voluntary attention. Yeah, the Egyptians had figured that out in their mythology like
Already.
5,000 years ago. Yeah, they didn't understand it explicitly in some sense, but they knew that that eagle eye, that falcon eye, because falcons can really see, was and that's the Egyptian eye as well.
It's also the overview, right?
Yeah,
so
that's
look at it
right.
from
It's
a
like-
distance.
You bet, from above.
Yeah.
But high resolution from above, right? And so, yeah, so Horus is a youthful god, and he grows up outside the state, in some sense alienated from it. But he differs from his father, Osiris, in that he can see.
See, and this is where I get a little, where he kind of, Jordan Peterson turns me off, because not everything is some kind of college lecture where you need to have these these type of examples that he gives. Like this isn't a lecture hall. Just say what you want to say. We don't need to know about Cyrus and this and that. Like, what are you talking about? You lose the narrative in this stuff sometimes.
Now, he goes back to Egypt and has a terrible battle with Seth and defeats him, although he loses an eye in the process. So the story there is that the terrible power that constantly threatens the state is so malevolent that even if you pay careful attention to it, it can still damage you. But he overcomes Seth and banishes him. But then he takes his eye, instead of putting it back in his head and becoming king, he doesn't do that. He goes to the underworld, where his father, Osiris, is languishing, sort of in a half-alive state. And he gives his father the eye, and then they unite. And the symbol for pharaonic sovereignty was the union of Osiris and Horus. And so it's the proper tradition given sight by the living is the antidote to the power that disintegrates the state.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And how
It's
can we
amazing.
use this knowledge today, for instance? What can we do? Because, yeah, I think both of us have been trying to get people out of the ant mill. We at least ourselves stepped aside, I think. At least I did.
Our work has been on, so Michaela and I worked on a project that we now have a website for, selfauthoring.com, on the future authoring program, and we got people to develop their vision, right?
A vision of the ideal future.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a visionary exercise, and so one of the things you do with people to enhance their vision and to stave off the degeneration of the state is for them to develop a positive vision going forward, because we're visionary creatures. And you could say, well, how does that work socially? It's like, well, it works psychologically and it works socially. So if you have a positive vision of the future, you can revitalize your own tyrannical self and stave off nihilism and despair and all of that. And then if you get good at implementing that and you start to think, let's say, on a broader scale, then you can start moving beyond your own personal concerns, which is where you should start, and maybe start acting in a manner that helps you restore beneficial order, to restore beneficial order to the state itself. But it starts with the individual, fundamentally.
Right. Yeah, because I feel that...
I mean, that is a long way to go. That's a lot of words to just say, be a decent person. Take responsibility. And this is where he loses, because he just goes off on these diatribes. And believe me, I mean, I get it. I do it too. But I mean, it's just like, you know, he's an academic. He's a professor from Canada. You know, he made his bones by standing up and saying, I'm not using people's pronouns. I'm not using your pronouns. I'm not calling you what you want to be called. I'm not doing it. So that's where he comes from. But every interview he does, he's just trying to, it seems like he's always trying to prove himself and show what an academic, and he's a professor. I mean, that is a lot of words and a lot of, you know, philosophy and other stuff to just say, be a decent person.
I feel that many people are in a kind of survival mode. They can't really see any further than the next day or something, or the next month. But if you do, so I devised, based on the self-authoring, I devised letters to the future.
Yeah.
And in the letters to the future, people think about the ideal world if there were no constraints at all, versus the world that will come to pass if they go on like this.
Yeah.
And they devise a plan for themselves, a very concrete plan. What can I contribute today or tomorrow? Or so if people start writing today, they can make changes tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
right.
we can,
or even today.
Or today is even better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
they're at your show now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you do as a behavior therapist is help people lay out. Well, you lay out the problem first. What's wrong with your life? Why are you suffering unduly? And then you lay out something approximating an alternative to that. Like you're miserable. What's the nature of the misery precisely? You can do a multidimensional analysis. Maybe you don't have an intimate relationship. We did this with the past authoring exercises. Don't have an intimate relationship. You don't have any friends. You don't have a job or a career. You're not educated the way you should be. You're not taking care of yourself mentally and physically. You don't use your time outside of work well, etc. Those are all domains where you might be lacking. And then you can think of, well, what could you have if that was optimized? The future authoring program does that. And then what concrete, implementable, incremental steps could you take to realize that? And that works just fine. And the thing that's cool about that too is, you know, if people are desperate, they think, well, everything in my life is broken. I'm so low, I can't even look at my circumstance without terror, and I'll never get out of this. So that would be true in some sense. If
it's very simple. You got to get to the you got to break it down to the lowest common factor. What broke you? Who broke you? And you deal with that. It's all toxicity based. All of this. What is the source of the toxicity? Where is the tumor? Just like with cancer. It's like what is the infection? What is the tumor? What is the malignancy? Where is the cancer? You find it, you isolate it, and you cut it out forever. You don't try to live with it. You don't try to understand it. Okay? You don't think, oh, maybe it's going to change. Hope it's going to change. It's not going to change until you do something about it, until you cut it out.
If improvement was linear, but it's not. It tends to rise exponentially once you get going.
It starts with the first step. That's what I've noticed. A very small first step.
Yeah, well, it has to be. So the rule for the first step is something like, is there something you know that you should do, that you could do, that you would do? And that's often a demoralizing exercise in some sense to think that through, because you think, well, you know, here's a radical change I need to make in my life, but there's no way I'm going to do that. But maybe I take a tiny step. And then you have to ask yourself, well, given how useless I am, how tiny a step would it have to be? And then the answer is, well, I've tried lots of times in the past and failed, so it needs to be a smaller step. And then you get to the point where you think, oh my God, that's the biggest step I can take. And often the answer is yes.
It doesn't matter what step you take, though. It doesn't matter what step you take if you're not going to cut out the source of the problem. You can take all the steps you want to take. And this is usually where my issues are with him. He just goes on and takes a long way around. It's like, no, you got to deal with the problem first and cut it out before you start taking steps to move forward. Because trying to move forward without addressing your past of what caused the problem in the first place is actually just going to move you backwards. You're going nowhere.
You'll do it. Maybe it's a tiny step forward. It's an embarrassing step forward. But if you take it, you're in a slightly better place. You know, I had clients whose lives were terribly messed up, both internally and externally. So, for example, their rooms, maybe they were adults who should have left home long ago, and the rooms were just a catastrophic mess. The bedrooms they lived in, and they're still in their parents' house. And we'd start by getting them to clean up like one corner of one drawer in their bureau.
Now, how about getting them out of the house? See, here it is. Small, like, there's a reason why you're an adult and you're living like that in the first place. Okay, trying to, well, just clean up your, no, clean up yourself and get out of the house.
And so embarrassing.
I should start doing that as well.
Yeah. Well, it is a really useful exercise. If you find that there's something around you that's out of order and you won't put it in order, then you have to, because it's daunting, then you have to decrease the demand you place on yourself. So one of the things I do with my office, for example, if it gets into a mess, is every time I go into my office, I'll clean up 2 things.
Yeah.
And then, because all you have to do is clean up slightly faster than you make a mess, and everything falls into order.
Yeah.
And so you can bargain with yourself, you can find out what step you're actually willing to take. Now, it's a terrifying.
See, you're either going to clean up or you're not going to clean up. These steps and all this, you're just fucking around with the problem. Okay, you're just poking at it. You gotta make the jump. You have to.
Fine thing, because you do reveal to yourself your own weakness, right? Because you think, well, I can just leap forward on that front. It's like, well, you haven't for 20 years.
Yeah.
So
They want to go too fast.
yeah,
So,
they
but-
want to bite off more than they can chew.
Exactly. So what would you advise to people who want to contribute to society these days? Because I've been approached by lots of people that say, I don't really know what to do.
I'd say start by putting your own house in order. I really mean that. It's like, if your day-to-day routines are not put together in a way that's productive and generous, you haven't regulated your intimate relationships, your friendships, and so forth, you're not really in any position to be thinking about what you can do for the broader community, because you just don't know enough.
Again, until you drill down to what broke you in the first place, none of this is going to matter. None of it. You're just spinning your heels and basically lying to yourself. Oh, I'm taking these little steps. Well, you haven't dealt with, okay, what caused you to be like this in the first place? Until you do that, you're going nowhere.
And so,
of course, but you're of course a clinical psychologist, but I talk to people who have their house in order. They want to really contribute to society, but they say it's so big what's going on at the moment. Like in society, the government is making all the decisions, so there's this
there's lots of things people can do on that front that are concrete. You could join a political party and volunteer. You could join a businessman's club. You could join a sports club. Like, do something social on the social front and offer your service.
And again, those are good things, but they're also places littered with toxicity and narcissism and sociopaths. By throwing yourself into one of those organizations before you have dealt with the toxicity, with the tumor, whatever is causing, whatever broke you in the first place, is just going to lead you down the same path of what you're in the first place, because you are going to attract the same type of individuals who broke you in the first place.
And then go there and see what needs to be done and start doing it. If you do that in a political party, if you're young and you're useful, opportunities will open up to you so fast you can't even believe it, because every political party and almost all, say, businessmen's clubs and that sort of thing, they're just dying for membership. And people have abandoned or go to a church. Well, I don't believe in God. It's like, and the church is messed up. It's like, hey, there's some opportunity for you. Go.
They started this with the example of the ants following the leader, and he's basically suggesting join an anthill, join an ant colony, another ant colony, as a first step. Are you like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, like there's a lot of things I like Jordan Peterson about. I like his stance. Like I said, I like his stances on refusing to use pronouns and plenty other things. But when he talks narcissism, like, and I've heard him try to talk narcissism before, he doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Because she gave this example of the ant colonies, that, queen bee, whatever you want to call it, of following the leader. It's the same. So all he's doing is like, oh, go join another ant colony. That's what he's saying here.
You could go try to be of service there and see if you could do something useful. And that's part of resurrecting your dead father, And so the fact that it's troublesome and difficult is like, well, you wanted to do something about something troublesome and difficult, so there it is ahead of you. And so people have abandoned their civic responsibility. And so what happens is that you get fragmentary individuals, no intermediary civic groups, and a tyrant. Well, that's a complete bloody catastrophe. And one of the only things you can do about that is start to operate at maybe one level beyond where you are. And you know, one of the things you see in Canada, for example, is that the school boards are dementedly ideologically possessed. Well, why? Well, because reasonable people don't take the responsibility of running for, it's an elected position, for a school board position. And so who do you get in there? You get demented, resentful activists who have nothing better to do than cause trouble. And then you think, why are these institutions so much trouble? And the answer is, well, the reasonable people have decided that, now it's more complex because sometimes the reasonable people also have their hands full in some sense, right? Because they're already doing productive things. But it doesn't matter, because if you let the least able and most resentful occupy all the intermediary administrative positions, then you have tyranny emerging at all those levels. And so,
yeah, this is part of the balkanization issue that I brought up politically, that you have to get on these school boards and get in these organizations. And the problem is, if you're a busy person, if you're a productive person, if you're somebody who has to go to work, you don't have a lot of people don't have time for this. And that's why these types of people who are angry and they're empty, got empty lives, are looking to get on these positions, because they're positions of power, where then they can lead the ant colony.
so a huge part of what people need to do, and this is particularly true of young people, is they have to reacquaint themselves with civic responsibility, and they can't let, what would you call that, a too premature.
Well, who's teaching civics? No, the first thing you need to do is start teaching civics in school, because none of these kids, whether it be in the United States, Canada, you know, probably Australia, Europe, wherever, okay, don't understand how their governments and their societies were set up to work. They don't understand it because it wasn't taught. All they're getting now is the wishes, okay, of what their green-haired teacher thinks it should be. Again, you got to get to the root cause. Why don't these kids know civics? Because nobody's taught them civics.
Cynicism stop them. Well, yes, things are broken. They've always been broken. It's like it's up to you to
Do something.
knit them back together.
Well, what I say, write your letter to the future, then you will find out what your contribution can be, because it has to be something that energizes you, because otherwise, if I don't get energy from something, I'm...
Yeah, well, that's a marker, right? It's a marker. You wouldn't get energy from it unless it was right for you in some sense. The other thing you can look at, you think, well, this really bugs me. It's like, okay, think about that. There's an infinite number of things in principle that could bug you, because there's just no shortage of problems, right? There's an infinite number of problems. But some problems pick you and they bug you. It's like, yeah, well, that's your destiny calling. What bugs you is your destiny calling. That is what it is.
True.
And you might think, well, that's really annoying. It's like, well, it won't let you go, right? And it's very strange, because there's a concordance then between your psyche and the world. And part of that concordance can be found in that positive adventure that you described, but part of it can be found in the fact that you get gripped. It's like, I just can't stop thinking about this. It's like, hey man, that's your problem. Now why? Who knows? And it doesn't mean just because it grips you that you know what to do about it, but the fact that it grips you, that's a genuine phenomenological, what would you say? Experience. It's real.
Yes, what I usually do, I start talking to people, because they kind of reflect it back to me, and then one person says this, one person says this, and so we get all kinds of pieces of information, and then I think, okay, this is the problem, and now I want to
one of the things I've noticed as I've talked to good or great leaders around the world is that one of the defining hallmarks of a great leader is that they go around, listen, and aggregate problems. So if you go out and door knock as a political figure, which is a hard thing to do, because people are some are welcoming and some aren't, and you deal with a huge variety of people. It's quite intimidating. That's something you do as a volunteer, let's say, if you decided to join a political party. You go door knock, and your job isn't to sell the party platform to the person that you're talking to. Your job is to listen to what their problems are.
Yes.
And then maybe you're...
You know, I don't necessarily agree with this. To solve your problems, join a political party, because that's why the people that you want to go fight against in the political party join, because they're trying to solve their problems and find happiness in a political party. You're not going to find happiness in a political party. You have to deal with what broke you in the past. This is putting the cart way before the horse. Way before the horse here.
Your party might have something to offer, but the fundamental issue is to listen. What are the problems? So you listen to 100 people, and then you can aggregate the problem and think, okay, got the diagnosis, right? From the horse's mouth, I got the diagnosis. Okay, now then you can think, well, there's the diagnosis. Here's an array of possible solutions. And then you can talk to people about the problem, and you can say, well, here's some things we could do. And then you can see how people are responding to that. Maybe they go, oh my God, I never thought of that. That's a great solution. I'd be happy to help you with that. It's like, okay, that's a pretty good solution.
Yeah.
And that definitely works. I mean, I've had lots of experiences in my life where I diagnosed something, let's say, and then started...
Good evening. The show will start soon. Please go to your seat.
10 minutes is yeah.
So you can tell if you've got a solution that's credible.
Well, I guess they're at a play or something. That would explain the why. I'm like, why is this woman dressed in an evening gown for this is way overdressed. So they must be like at an opera or a play or something like that.
And this is good for people who are in sales to know too. If you're a salesman, you go to a company and you say, well, what problems are you having? And you don't sell, because selling requires force. You say, what problems are you having? And then they tell you. And then you think, well, do I have anything that would help them solve that problem? And if the answer is no, you should probably just go somewhere else, because you're not going to make the sale.
But what's the source of the problem? Every problem, every issue has a source. And it doesn't seem like he wants to deal with the source. He wants to deal with other solutions. That's taking, if you have an infection, and that's the equivalent of taking NyQuil, instead of attacking the infection with antibiotics, dealing with the actual infection.
But if maybe they lay out their problems, and then they're pretty happy with you because you listened, and so then they trust you, especially if you're listening without being instrumental and manipulative about it. And then you see, well, you have a problem, and we have a solution. Now, if the problem and the solution don't match, then, well, you should go somewhere else, because you're not going to sell anything anyways.
But actually, one of the things I think we lack is that we should try to create win-win situations.
Yes, definitely.
And that's exactly what you're now describing. And listening to each other is a first step. But second is, okay, how can we make each other stronger?
Yeah, well, so sometimes people think that within the confines of a marriage that what you're doing is continually compromising, and that's what you should be doing. But that's not right. No. So if you have a problem, we're married, you have a problem and I have a problem, then I could hear your problem and you could hear mine, and then we could put our heads together and we could think, okay, is there a way we could formulate a joint solution that would be better than any solution that either of us could do alone, which is kind of what the marriage is, you know. And you can almost always do that if you open yourself up to it. You think, well, is there a way that you can get what you need and want, and me too, but in a better way than we'd get separately? And that is the basis for the best kind of relationship moving forward intimately, but also with friends, certainly with business partners, because the other thing is that if your interests are aligned with your business partners in this fundamental way, it's like you're going for what you need and want, and so am I, we don't even have to monitor each other. No. It's like I can just say, well, especially if I also believe that you're competent and trustworthy, and if I don't, then why would I be doing this? But then I can think, well, you can just go off and do your own thing, because you'll bring your talents to bear on the problem, and they'll be different than my talents, and we'll definitely get a synergy out of that.
Exactly.
And those are, you know, you think, if you're thinking about starting a business enterprise and you think that what you do when you make a sale is get the better of the other person, you're a bloody fool, because first of all, they will figure that out and they will take their revenge, that's for sure. You don't, that's not a sustainable relationship.
Exactly.
It forces you to be psychopathic and narcissistic and exploitative, and then you train yourself to do that. And if you think that's the route to business success, then, well, then you're a fool, and a manipulative and exploitative fool at that. It's just, that is not how the world works.
Exactly.
Yeah, so.
Well, let's go for the win-win.
These aren't healthy environments in the first place. See, he's trying to get you to be able to work within narcissism and to deal and to survive within toxic environments. And you're never going to be able to do that. This is why so many people who go to therapy and have been through therapists and psychologists end up on my channel. Because they're put through, and I'm not saying I'm not anti-therapy, I'm not anti-psych, I'm anti-bad therapy. Okay? If you're going to just keep people in these toxic situations and try to get them to deal with the toxicity instead of like, this is toxic, it's never going to end up well, get out, you're not helping anybody. This is why, again, this is why so many people after years of therapy end up on my channel. Because I'm telling you what the root, you gotta get rid of the root cause. You can't work within a narcissist in one of these narcissistic organizations. You can't. Trying to out narcissist a narcissist isn't gonna work.
Win situation.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Mutual enthusiasm. That's yeah. What I try to do with people that I negotiate with, when I negotiate with them about anything, is I would like you to walk away from this negotiation thrilled. That would be perfect if we could pull that off. It's like, yes, I want to do this. It's like, nah, not you forced me into a corner.
And how often does that actually happen? And what is the long-term success rate on this? That I would be interested to know. Because these people could walk away, it all falls apart, he never hears from him again, and he thinks, oh yeah, what I said worked. No, they just moved on because they didn't like your bad advice.
Corner, and I have to submit. Like, you don't get willing partners that way.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a short-term solution, but it won't work in the long
it's a short-term solution dependent on force. Well, great. If you want to bring lawyers into it and, you know, castigate your business partners into compliance with your demands, like, go for it. See what sort of life you have. That's just misery.
Yes.
You know, so, and that's part of the problem with the leftist insistence, for example, that there's nothing but power. It's like, that's it. You could hardly formulate a statement less true than that. There's power when things fall apart. But
yeah, I feel that in the last couple of years, or actually maybe maybe even centuries, people with Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy have driven to the top, and now we're
in an epidemic of narcissism.
Yeah,
it's been going that way for 60 years. Societal narcissism, and you're going to have to take these people on in government and get them out of office and take over your school boards and get rid of these dysfunctional teachers. Yeah, get involved in those things, because the problem is they're miseducating your children.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I think maybe part of that is because we do an extremely bad job of regulating narcissism online. There's no punishment for it.
No.
So I read, for example, I found all sorts of markers on YouTube for narcissism.
There's punishment, you know, if you follow channels like mine who tells you to cut the narcissist out and keep him out of your life, that is the punishment. And I've done videos on this before. No contact. Cutting them out is the consequence, is the punishment for the narcissist. It is the punishment for narcissism.
In the comments section. So I can tell you a bunch of them.
Okay.
Anonymous name, anonymous demonic name. That's a really good marker.
Okay.
use of bro or bruh or dude or casual use of a first name or derisive humor or the use of LOL, laugh out loud, or LMFAO, which is laugh my fucking ass off.
Okay.
And so any derisive, contemptuous humor combined with anonymity and this casual use of familiarity, plus, it's like troll demons.
Okay.
It's terrible. And those are the people who will say things that would absolutely, instantly get them punched if they ever said them to someone in person.
Okay.
And so they're completely uncontrolled. And the social media companies either don't regulate them, even though they could, because, for example, all you'd have to do in the comments section is separate the real people from the demon trolls, and that would control 90% of pathological activity. So imagine on YouTube, for example, you have to validate your identity like you do on Twitter if you get a blue check. Then you just divide the comment sections, like real human beings here, demonic trolls and bots here in hell, right? Underneath the action. Now, if you want to go read the demonic troll comments, no problem.
Yeah, it would be
but
nice.
it'd be better just to stay with the real people.
That's what a block button is for. You know, trolls are real easy to deal with online. You just put them on block. On YouTube, they're great. You just hit a little thing. Comments will never show up on the channel again. Bye. No contact. Cutting them out is the consequence. And it drives them fucking insane. You know how many people on my channel have 10, 20, 30 different fake names? One gets banned, they come back with another one, and they're just angry about it. And what is the first thing they're screaming about? Oh, you blocked me. Yeah, good, I'm gonna block you again. That's how you deal with it. You cut them out. It drives them insane.
And because those people are enabled, the social media companies capitalize on the what would you call it?
Because I don't want censorship. I don't want censorship. Okay? I don't. You want to go be an asshole? Go be an asshole. Just give me the ability, okay, to block it and kick it off my channel forever. That's it. That's it.
The aggressiveness and that they
the more
generate.
bold the statements are, the better it's more views.
It's a cheap way of attracting attention. And so I think of that as, imagine that you could run a factory and produce something.
Yeah, but the attention isn't real, because if you're doing it anonymously, yeah, your anonymous account is getting attention, but you're not. And that's what makes them even more miserable. That's why blocking them is just so satisfying, because it drives them fucking insane.
And pollute like mad, right? Externalized cost. Well, social media companies, their externalized pollution is social, right? It's the virtual equivalent of pollution. They pay zero price for it. Well, so far, you know, they'll pay for it, because if your platform gets completely overrun by demonic trolls, which is probably almost the case now with Twitter, it's just going to collapse, because then it's a non-playable game, right? It's not. There's not enough reciprocity for anyone to want to be on the platform, and that hasn't happened yet to Twitter, but it probably will. Well, it looks to me like.
Well, as of today, it looks like Twitter froze their stock, which means that the sale to Musk is imminent, probably within the next. I heard within the next week or two. It's all going to be turned over to Elon Musk. They're probably going to try to draw it out till after the midterm elections, you know, because they don't want, like, now if he took over today, their fear is there's 3 weeks until the midterms, and that's enough of a push with these what they think are close races. They're not. They're not close races. The Republicans, and not due to most of anything they did. It's just the Democrats are so bad. Are going to sweep up everything, so they're going to try to delay this for as long as they can.
Yeah.
It looks to me like it's tilting in that direction more all the time.
Well, especially since a lot of people are thrown off Twitter, but these are scientists, people who have a different narrative than the official narrative.
Well, that's another
problem.
Sure, definitely. Well, that also means that fair players who are antagonists.
And that's the point. see how the narcissist plays the game. And I've been telling you, you have to play the game by their rules. Their goal is to silence you. So the only way you're going to beat them is to silence them, is to block them from your channel, keep them away, cut it out. Play the game as they're playing the game.
Antagonistic, let's say, get eliminated from the game. Well, if you do that enough, you just eliminate everybody who plays fair, because as the system gets more and more pathological, it takes...
The system isn't fair. Again, we're not playing a fair game. The game changed 30 years ago. Okay? It's just getting to the point now that our side is finally realizing that these are the rules. They made the rules. And unless we play by the rules, nothing's going to change. Sitting there and thumping the rule book and yelling hypocrisy gets you nowhere. It's what they want you to do.
Takes less and less truth to be defined as a troublemaker. Then you just have nothing but troll demons. And I do think they're demons. Okay, this is why. Because you might think a troll on Twitter is a human being. It's like, no, it's not. The person who originated the thought was a human being, in some sense, under the grip of a system of pathological ideas. But as soon as they transform themselves into...
They got the idea from that hive mind that you started the video talking about, that ant colony that's doing follow the leader. That's where the idea came from in the first place. And now you're suggesting that people go and join these type of organizations. No, cut them out. Cut them out completely.
To an electronic avatar, and there's millions of copies of them. They're not human anymore, right? They're whatever the hell you are when you're virtualized.
Seeing, yeah.
Well, right, but it's not just text, because it's replicated everywhere, right? So it's something we don't understand. That's right. That's right. Well, it's got a viral element. Absolutely, it's got an infectious and viral element, and it infects people with rage. And that's actually the provocation, because the comments are so derisive. They're enraging. And the social media companies capitalize on the rage. And then they raise the temperature of the whole society.
Yes.
And God only knows, is that fatal? We don't know.
Can we throw some water on it? It cools down. Let's do that in our next talk and talk about this.
Well, it's very true. I think some of the platforms, I don't know if I had a very ambivalent relationship with Twitter. I wanted to use it because I wanted to understand it, but it's very difficult to stay civil and use Twitter. Now, I think
you can't. No, like if you're hoping to remain civil in this entire societal narcissism epidemic, you're out of your mind. And this is where Jordan Peterson doesn't understand narcissism. He doesn't. He's coming from it from an academic and a psychologist and a type of view where, trying to break down and analyze and find the hidden meaning in this and that. No, it's very simple. You either play the games by their rules, okay, and be just as vicious and nasty as they are, and then cut them out, or you're going to be destroyed by it. He doesn't understand narcissism. He doesn't. He understands the tenets of it. He can identify it when he sees it, but he doesn't know what the hell to do about it. He doesn't. This is all theory, and he doesn't know. And if he wants Twitter to remain civil and social media to remain civil, that ain't the game. That ain't the game as it's played. I've made this point in the past. Twitter largely, okay, it's the main one, but all social media is a sewer, is an absolute sewer. But what happens to societies without sewers, without sewer systems? They get toxic and poisoned and die. It's needed. It has to go somewhere. It has to be somewhere. You're either going to deal with it and be the water treatment plant for this, or you're going to be destroyed by it. Sitting there and hoping that for a platform where everybody's civil and it's unrealistic. He doesn't really understand narcissism. He talks a good game because, he's educated. He's a professor. He's a doctor. He goes on lecture tours. He does this for a living. But he doesn't, once you break down the flowery language and the long diatribes that he goes off about this Egyptian and that, cut it out. It's not that complicated of a problem. He doesn't understand that.
Partly because the small text length of Twitter means that any communication about an important topic should not occur on Twitter. But we don't know.
That's not true. It's because it's short. It could say everything. That's why memes are so important. That's why memes are so effective. Memes is just a picture, and it gives an entire story within a picture. Okay, something that could take 1,000 words to write. Okay, summed up in one picture.
Right, because we don't know the psychological rules for communicating with people when you only have a limited character set. No one has any idea, especially when it's virtualized and abstracted. Sure. But it looks to me like you can't discuss anything serious on Twitter without it degenerating.
Right.
So,
right. Well, let's see how we can fix that next time. And your show is on now.
Yeah.
And thank you for this.
You bet. Nice to talk to you again. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
He doesn't understand. He knows what it is, but he doesn't understand how to deal with it because he still wants to fuck with it. He still thinks you can change these people. You can't. And hoping for a civil society and hoping for something different is insane. You're either going to play the game by their rules and force them to play the game by their rules and hold them to their own standards, or you're just going to be sucked into the societal narcissism rabbit hole even deeper. He doesn't understand that. So that's all I had to say on that. So thank you again, Aaron, for another topic and contribution. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like me to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all of this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with either the Cash App, Zelle, or PayPal, and email links in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Refuge from